work.
Okay. Okay. So, hi, Erica. We're back. Okay.
Or Paco's just a
Just me. So we're all feeling comfortable with that. The kids are okay with that. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we brought that up so that we all had a common understanding. And also something I was thinking about, I didn't carry, the reason I chose to carry our meeting in English today, and we've talked about that in the past of having our learning in Spanish. Today, since we were doing the majority of our time in our ELD and talking about kind of a mix of this, that's why I did English. But my goal is to be able to do more in Spanish that we can, and even Karen had talked about, like, say for example, Crystal and Susan are with us, or Deanne is with us during our meetings. They don't necessarily know Spanish, but you've been involved in it quite a bit, so you'd be able to pick up on some of that.
Yeah, she does.
She has no Susan.
She does.
I feel like Deanne understands 80%.
We will encourage you.
My friends, we will encourage Susan to use her Spanish.
What's your percentage of understanding? 50%?
Depends what subject we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Is it first
Which
grade?
one?
I can do math in Spanish.
Without visuals?
But anyways, back to what we were saying. Karen had suggested when she had come, she had that came up as to what would you do then if our and please feel free, Jess, you were there too to chime in. But she had suggested that if you were to have that and you want to hold it, and you should hold it in Spanish, is to have your agenda or any materials or basically what you're going to go through and discuss that either ahead of time in person or through an email or a detailed agenda maybe, that then they can feel and be prepared ahead of time to be able to have an idea of what's going on. And they said that as long as when we were to speak in Spanish, by our movements, by our conversation, they would be able to still take part in that. So that would be a goal of mine, I guess, as a coach, to be able to do more of that and to have more in Spanish. I know we had our half-day PD that time about the word study, completely in Spanish, with the exception of a couple times in English that we had changed. I think it was one time within that. And Claudia had come and Jen had come, if you remember that. And so we were able to have that learning in Spanish, which was really nice. So I'm hoping that we can do that as well. Our times when we are in talking about English, well, then obviously it makes probably most sense to be discussing that in English. But I wanted to make sure that I stuck that in there too. Deanne also sent out an email just asking about what your physical language reminder is, or if you have any. Karen, when she was here, she had brought back to, and she always discussed in what are we as, the reminder is more for ourselves than for our kids a lot of times. And to remind ourselves which language we are and to be cognizant as to how we're switching. Because she didn't do it with us. She had done it prior.
She flip-flopped like crazy with us that day.
When she was with us.
Yeah. She usually doesn't do that.
She doesn't usually do that, no. But she did do a little example of how she had her magic scarf, because that's her thing is her magic scarf. So she took it on and off and on and off when she would change between the languages. And she's like, until you have that, almost like as a physical reminder for yourself, that you're more cognizant of that and not being able to do that. So I know, Beth, you had shared with the group, I believe it was with everybody, about what you do in your class, and that maybe at this point in the year that you don't need that physical reminder, but it did bring back a good point that we had talked a lot about, and I brought, because we had the progress monitoring on Thursday, so I had come from Karen Beeman on Wednesday, and I had progress monitoring, and Beth was there for that, and you had brought up that point about, if at this point in the year my students already are able to stay in one language, and at lunchtime we do the switch, when they come back it's all in Spanish or the other language, whatever.
When Crystal comes in at 1:15.
Oh, when Crystal comes in. So then they know that, and that's routine. And Karen had because I had brought that up, because then I said, well, then it's a good point, what do we, because I feel like when we go across that, it's not that everyone's just constantly flipping back and forth, but there is that we almost sometimes do that, need that physical reminder. And she had said it's thinking about that systems piece. And I think that was Deanne's thing, is when I come into your room, like, is there something that I can watch for or know to be able to see what language you are in or how you're transitioning, and things like that. So,
and I know it doesn't happen a lot, but that's also very useful when you have subs, because your subs, if they know any little bit of Spanish, they switch all the time.
Oh, really?
Yes. If they know how to say grupo, they'll say, all right, grupo number 1, come to the class. Like, they constantly code switch. They try to use all the little words because they think they're doing good. But but it's also a good reminder for your subs that, even if you have just a sign in the front that you switch, like if you have natural breaks, but maybe you have a sign up that even if your sub just has to switch that sign, that maybe that helps them remember too.
And I'm wondering, if you have the sign, but even if there's that physical thing would be, because I know, like, Abby, in your room, you have the sign. But I've heard various subs that use their Spanish throughout the day, and, whether it's Spanish or English, it's a mix. And like you said, they're just trying to do their best. But maybe that physical reminder would be nice to have for somebody that was even in our rooms, like a sub or whatever. Interesting.
We had also talked about that importance of wearing that symbol for the other classes so that in passing, the kids know what language your class is in and know how to address them. But I think if the default language in the hallway just becomes Spanish, and between the classes we know are the bilingual classes, that elevates the status of Spanish, and they don't have to worry about what language do I address them in. Well, they're one of the bilingual classes, we address them in Spanish.
But sometimes, though,
if they're
transitions is in English, like if they're coming from
PE
and
or to PE, like from the
depends how you
they
how
switch.
you do
Could
it.
it be an environmental thing?
Because even like at the end of the day,
See, my kids just know once they get into the gym, it changes to English. Once they get into the library, and then when we're in the hallway, it's Spanish.
Spanish.
It's an environmental
Except
change.
if it's in at the end of the day, for example, and you're
right.
in whatever. But it would be nice I think that's a good point, though, for others. It kind of goes back to what we were discussing about here and how the other students, like, perception.
Right, like, so maybe I'll change this. I'll try to address them more in the hallways in Spanish. The one difficulty in the hallway is most of the other people as they're passing are English speakers. So they'll see an Unger and it's like, good morning, and then they'll see a kindergartner and be like, oh, let me grab that stool. So, like, me being in Spanish and then they being in English, I think transitions are, like, in the hallway are just code switching all the time.
And
Which
I
they
also,
need to know, but
at the beginning of the year and previous years, I always spoke Spanish in the hallways with my students because it's when we have our transitions. We go to or after lunch. But then at the beginning of the year, I think Kayla wanted to tell something to my students, and her students were like, "No, they don't speak English." And Kayla was like, "Yeah, they're bilingual." Like, no, they only speak in Spanish.
That's a good.
So for me, it was like, I think, like, I need to speak English in front of other students,
Right.
to my students.
And I've tried to make myself more approachable to the monolingual kids in the first place this year so that they want to be in my room and with my kids too. And so sometimes I feel like when I'm only in Spanish in the hallway with my kids, that pushes away the non-bilinguals from interacting too, like you were saying.
kind of goes back to what we were talking about.
Right.
The Spanish, and just the whole perception.
Well, and maybe even beyond elevating the value of Spanish, we need to elevate the value of being bilingual.
Bilingual is more that.
Because I don't think they devalue Spanish.
To speak Somali to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't want those kids to lose home language either.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you elevate, like, Spanish needs to be elevated, but if you elevate Spanish too high, you're segregating. Because if our kids stay in Spanish, that they do outside at recess, make their little Spanish-speaking group and just play soccer, and then Lyric will come up and ask if he can play, but they're only speaking Spanish, and then automatically Lyric's excluded. Like, it does create some segregation. Like, I don't want to. Spanish should be elevated. It should be equal. It shouldn't be elevated. It should be equal.
And I think by elevated, what we mean by that is that elevating its current status, because
Across
currently it's
everyone.
not equal. It's considered below. It's always smaller in bilingual books, or it's usually below the English in bilingual books. Elevating Spanish to even the playing field, but really, I think what we keep circling back to is that bilingualism, and like you said earlier, educating people within the building is going to be the most effective way to change perception.
And when I don't remember what grade level it was, I think somebody did it though at their APTT when they did it as a whole group. Instead of doing the English first, they did Spanish first. So even things like that, that we don't always have to start with English.
Yeah.
It's true. Is that you guys?
No, because they always went first.
Somebody did, but maybe I'm making that up.
What is it?
I thought somebody went, like one of the grade levels did that, but
Yeah.
maybe.
That's cool.
Okay, well, I think we got through a lot of things, and I think, I mean, one way is that Pioneer report, and I think, and I'm sure they're going to reach out to all of us, kind of, in thinking about how can we best. And I'll sit down with Deanna and kind of go over our thoughts and just what we discussed all today, so that can be messaged as well, so that we're all on the same page. One of the last things I'll just quick touch on, we're past time, is the being sure, one of the big things that we kept going back to is making sure that in our English language development time that we're really hitting on all 4 language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, all students, and doing it every single day.
Including your graduated kids.
Including, all of your students. And that I was going to have us, and I apologize, I don't like having you bring stuff and then we never get to it. But this is where I was going to, have you kind of share out and think about that. But that's what I guess our charge will be for this next time that we'll go into and think about more is what are those 4 language domains. And we should be seeing that in your unit plans and your lesson plans, daily lesson plans too. What are you doing, and so that you yourself are able to cognitively think about each of those domains, and are we exposing them to all different.
Speaking
All
of
right.
your units, I know I talked to a couple of you, but not all of you. I had talked to Deanne about using some of those extra hours, like the unit planning hours, to develop the ELD time in the unit plans. And she said that was fine, and she also said that if that caused you to go over that 20 hours, that's okay. So I know
Yeah,
Susan and Joanna
that's-
and I have talked, and we really want to be able to plan that with you guys and help. And we know some of that might be as a bilingual team to figure out some of those sections and what we need to plan, and then some of that might just be like use a grade level or with a pair or whatever. So just that's on your radar that we want to do that, but we just haven't figured out when or how yet. So just
Does
FYI.
that sound, though, initially, does that sound like a nice idea?
What do you think,
be able to do
Abby?
that?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm wondering if I could join Cassie, since I'll be teaching 2nd grade next year.
Oh,
that
that'd
might
be perfect.
help.
Would that be
Yeah.
helpful for you yourself?
For me
Would that be
personally,
helpful?
I don't know what.
I mean, because we don't want you doing it if it's not going to be helpful. That's silly. That's silly. But if you think there'd be value to do that, I'd say that's awesome.
So,
So,
Just so
okay.
you know, we want to do that with you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, I don't know if my favorite animal